Hey guys, it's Mike from Shimino's Workshop. Here we have a Korbanth Parks DM1 set. It's a pair. Two separate hilts that are joined by a coupler. These have been installed with Proffieboard, NPXL, a removable chassis setup with in-hilt charging. What makes this one a little bit different is the customer here wants to keep it in staff mode and wants the ability to charge it while it's in staff mode without having to separate the staff, pull the chassis out, charge it, and then assemble it again. So the chassis is actually a custom chassis designed by Jed King. I can put a link, although I don't know if he sells this on Shapeways, but I can put a link to his Facebook page. So he's designed the chassis that's been removable. I've used it in previous installs. But what was done special here is the nut that's on both sides is also here and here. That hole has been drilled out. The hole for the screw, I mean to say, has been drilled out. And that's where the recharge port is. So if we look, this is actually a kill key. Same thing here is a kill key. Which, when removed,
I have been waiting.
Exposes the recharge port, activates the Sabre.
I have been waiting.
Now again, even though this is a staff, it's installed as though it's two separate Sabres with a coupler joining them. So each has, they're independent. Each has a chassis, a battery, a Proffi, so they can operate independent of each other or together. We also have blade plugs on each side that have NPXL adapters. These have been installed with custom Sabre Shop PCBs, custom Sabre Shop holder, which I'll show once we open it up. So we can ignite. And that's just one side. Can ignite the other side. You get that dual hum. And of course you can pull the blade plugs out and put in a blade. This has been programmed for 36-inch blades on both sides, 130 pixels each. So you'll see how wide this is, because it's about 2 feet at least, probably a little bit more. Plus 3/6 foot, but you're 8 or 9 foot of Sabre staff here. That'll be interesting. Proffieboard 1.5 has SA22 fork, color change fork on it, although we're not taking advantage of color change here. This is mostly red. It's a number of fonts, smooth swing based fonts, as well as older plecter based fonts, so you have a mix of both. Sorry for the background noise. I think the dryer's spinning. So what I'd really like to show here, though, is disassembling and reassembling. And as you can see, we have a nice, perfect alignment of the buttons all the way down. And we'll show how that was accomplished as well, because it usually doesn't do that when you join these. Usually you have to do something to get the alignment correct. I used spacers. So we can unscrew, it's one spacer, and put those on the side, and then remove the coupler. Now, there's a couple of different couplers on the market. This one was provided, but I believe Custom Saber Shop sells these, where you have a single piece and then threaded pieces on each side that you connect with some screws. And so that's one way to get alignment, is by loosening the screws on both sides, putting it into a position, tightening them down, threading them together, seeing where your timing is at, and then just keep tweaking until you get perfect alignment. In my case, because the chassis, I don't have the end caps with me for the video, but these treads are longer. Not the treads themselves, but the whole tread piece is longer than the treads on the pommel cap. So what that's causing is it's hitting the chassis and the speaker when you screw this in, and they won't screw in all the way. So what I did was just 3D printed some black spacer rings. Black because, I mean, you have plenty of spacer rings along, well, not spacer rings, but you have detail here. So it seemed to fit well, right? We're just adding another ring. Some people use O-rings. I 3D printed several thicknesses and finally landed at a particular thickness that worked here for me on both sides. They're both the same width, which I think I landed at 2 millimeter, could be 2.1 millimeter wide. So there's that. But that wasn't enough. I also have a speaker spacer, because again, even with this, which just is filling the void between, because the treads are so long, it's just really filling the void between the end of the speaker and the end of the hilt and the inner part of the coupler. Even so, when tightening it, this was jamming up against the speaker and causing all sorts of issues. So I just created a small spacer. I forget, this could be 1 millimeter if I remember right. Just enough so that when it's put onto the chassis, like that, prevents the treads from hitting the speaker, damaging the speaker, or causing reduced noise or muffling. I did try to make sure that the speakers were seated all the way into the chassis, but I wasn't able to seat them 100% into the chassis. So my solution was just to ensure that a spacer will ensure that speaker doesn't get touched and damaged. So that's on both hilts. This one's a little bit more snug, so to get the chassis out, what I do is remove the top and just push with my finger to get it to come out the rest of the way. Another thing you do, because these are kind of floating buttons with plungers that hit the buttons that are on the chassis, I turn it upside down. Just like gravity, push those buttons down. Okay. So that's our chassis. So just to break this down a little bit, the emitter buttons are buttons, but they're non-functional. They don't have any wires running to them. They're just clicky. And those have been epoxied in with some E6000 using the buttons that are included with the kit. They've been removed from their PCBs, epoxied into place with E6000, and the same with these these screws. The screws themselves have been shortened a little bit, and then E6000 epoxy to hold them in place. And this screw was left longer. I don't know if you can see that in there, because it's used as a guide. We can see the chassis has a channel here. That screw goes into the channel just to keep it aligned. Now on the pommel side, these are not buttons. These have just been some custom 3D designed holders and plungers that, when pushed, plunge far enough to hit the switch plungers that are in the chassis. You have your recharge port, you have your Proffi inverted, SD card is up. There's a little cap and tape just to make sure you're not shorting things out when messing around. You have your custom Sabre Shop holder and PCB. Battery, 18650 battery, not removable. It looks like it could be removable, but it's not. And then some wire management back here to the speaker, 22 Veco bass speaker, 4 ohms, 3 watt is what it's advertised as. Okay. And then the same on this one. This one's a little bit looser. So this one actually just slides out, but same thing. Turn it upside down, let gravity push those buttons down for you. This one slides out, same setup though. I'll put some cap and tape there, but duplicated, exact. These chassis are the exact same. Swappable, doesn't matter what hilt you put them in, so that's nice. And fully, they work fully outside of the hilt. Which was the initial design, right? This recharge port used to be here between the buttons. So you would just slide it out, recharge, put your kill key in, slide it back in. Again, the chassis was redesigned for this customer to move the recharge port, repurposing this screw hole for the recharge port access, kill key access. Okay. So assembling, we can put, so let's take a look here. So we have a blade plug, which is being held by blade retention screws that have been drilled and tapped. I'm thinking 6/32. I forget what I did there. Probably not 440, probably 6/32. And I do 2, just to make sure that it's perfectly centered, so you get a nice red ring around. And I'll show that when I put it back together. And it's also flush down here, so that it makes contact with the PCB when it's in hilt. So it's nice and flush here, and it's also nice and flush up top. So we can put that back on. Again, I removed it just so I can use my finger to push the chassis out, because this hilt it's a little bit more snug than that one. So we can get that in. Then again, I turn it upside down, right? So I can get it started up until about then. I turn it upside down, and just to have those buttons in the down position. And then push it in just enough. Don't forget your speaker spacer, very important. Don't forget your coupler spacer. And then tighten that just hand snug for right now. Once we join them, we'll time them just by tightening and getting it where you want it, and then you're golden. But this should turn on. We should get our red ring. Nice. Hit your effects. And then we do the same with the other one. Yeah, that one slides in nice. speaker spacer. And now at this point, we put that one down. We pick up the one that has the coupler, put your spacer on, and then we can join the two. Get them started. Okay. And now we can just spin, hold one and spin the other till you get it snug. And then make sure you're not putting your hand or your palm over the buttons while we're tightening. We want to be careful because these will break. There's no question in my mind, you know, while they're epoxied on and they're solid, you hit these, you palm them or twist them, they're going to snap off. So be careful. And then just turn until they're lined up. And you got good spacing. They look like they're just part of the hilt. You have the coupler with the vented holes, so you're getting good sound venting out of that. You can see you have your recharge ports showing through.
If the trace was correct, I will find them quickly, Master. If the trace was correct, I will find them quickly, Master.
And you can cycle through the fonts.
Master.
So here you have the red buttons are your power buttons. The inner silver buttons are your auxiliaries.
Yes, my master.
Vengeance.
At last we will have our revenge.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Now the set comes, they're both drilled and tapped for cover tech. However, the kit, when you buy them, they only give you one cover tech, and that might be how the master. I don't own this as a master replica full size limited edition. I do own it as small scale, 0.45 scale. I don't recall. I never really looked to see what it does with the cover tech. If it has one, if only one of them has it. I suspect only one of them have it. But the kit does come with 2 holes tapped, 1 cover tech. I guess you could always buy another one, or maybe put a screw in there to conceal one of the holes. It's well balanced, it's centered. And then here are the kill keys that Jed had also made custom. I 3D printed them, sanded them down a little bit, try to make them look a little nice. But they're, and this is, I think, is intentional just due to where the hole lines up. They're not perfectly centered, the stem. Might be hard to pick up here, but it's a little off center, and that's because the recharge port is a little off center. So when you put this in, just make sure it's oriented properly and just push down, and now you got power killed. And the same thing on this side. And you can, well, you might not be able to see, but there's a little, when I take them out,
I have been waiting.
the kill key has a small little ring around the top of it, which allows you to get your fingernails into them and pry the kill key out of the recharge port. Because I didn't want to sand them down too much where they would just fall out. They're nice and snug enough that they're not going to fall out, but not too snug where you can't pry them out with your fingernails.
I have been waiting.
So that's nice. Challenging install at first. I did do this once, or attempted to do this once. Got both halves installed. That attempt did not have the recharge port mod, so it was just removable. Got it all where I wanted it. Went to thread this coupler on, and it froze. My threads froze on me, and I still to this date cannot get this coupler off one of them. Luckily I didn't put the other one on, but when you get this, you get two sets of the treads that you attach. And if you read the description, which I failed to do, but if you read the description on the Custom Saber Shop, I believe it's the Custom Saber Shop, it tells you you get two different treads because I guess Parks wasn't consistent on the tread size, on the hilt. And so they give you two different ones. And maybe that was my issue. Maybe I wasn't aware and I just went and turned it on. It got to the point where it froze and it was too late. So I had to redo it, which we were redoing it anyway because of the customizations for the recharge port, but that was very frustrating. But I learned a lot, which was good. I learned a lot on how to install this chassis, which made it easier the second time around. Working with the chassis was actually pretty easy. Good wire management. I shouldn't say good wire management, but lots of space for wire management. Lots of space for the battery. And being that it's fully removable, you know, some people like that. Obviously, there's no reveal, there's no custom or no crystal chamber, there's no accent LEDs for these. You know, you see some people are converting these screws to accent LEDs, which is nice. Yeah, so hopefully that's nice. I like it. This has always been one of my favorite sabers. I don't own one to date. I'll have to change that. I see the regional manager by Watto's junkyard, I believe, is being manufactured now. There were pre-orders not too long ago. So maybe that. Maybe I'll pick up a Parks. I don't think KR's doing another run of theirs. KR's was a single piece, which is fine, right? I mean, the movie, you don't see him split the saber outside of Obi-Wan chopping it in half. So really, you know, what's nice about the Parks version is that it does split. If you wanted to do the damaged version of the hilt, you could. KR's were probably more accurate to the Phantom Menace up until that point. You know, so to each their own. My preference is the splittable setup. What else could we say about this? Some of the other things with Parks, this particular one came painted. I've not powder coated the black. I do think it's just paint. Probably what was done is that the saber, you know, is machined, all, you know, obviously all aluminum, painted somehow. I don't know if that's sprayed or brushed, and then sanded to remove the paint off the high ends. Because you can see, if you look closely enough, you can see where there are sort of brush marks, probably from sanding or from a, what do they call those? Those a sponge type, you know, like a Brillo pad almost. So you can see some sand marks. So that's my guess, is that it's been painted and then sanded to remove the paint off the high marks. And then maybe just touched up. The emitter windows are closed. Sometimes you see them painted, sometimes you see them machined opened. But they're closed here and unpainted. And occasionally you might need to touch up. I'm not seeing anywhere where there's no black, or that the black has been, because the other thing is when they come assembled. Each half comes in a box assembled, and I think the paint up here will sometimes peel off when you separate the emitter from the hilt, and then you'll start seeing some of the paint separate. So you can always take it off, touch up the paint. You know, Tamiya model paints, flat black. Let it dry, which dry real fast. Those paints dry very fast. Yeah. And then, of course, to remove the blade plug, You don't need to remove the whole emitter, just the emitter cap. Loosen your retention screws on both sides. Take the plug out. Drop your blade in, 7/8 inch. Screw your retentions back on. And then you can either put the emitter on the blade from the bottom, so that, or you could, after it's on, drop it all the way down. But probably to avoid scratching your blade, I would just slip this on the bottom of the blade, put the blade in, tighten, and then put your emitter cap back on. Alright guys, any questions, drop them in the comments, send me a message, Shimino's Workshop on my Facebook page. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.